What is going on, my fellow nerds? OperatorOtter here, and today what I would like to discuss is how in the world we just witnessed those levels of shenanigans with the dot damage. Now, this is using the new amulet Ebon Piercer for the Necromancer, which unfortunately does have this bug that's happening with lucky hit chance, and if you understand how lucky hit chance works and you run it down the line, this can get real stupid real fast. But they're going to be fixing that. So I do want to express that there is no lucky hit chance event that can occur that is going to increase the damage of the dots, meaning that the damage that you're actually seeing in the video with the dot damage is literally going to be the damage that we're going to have in Season 4. But there's a catch. Our gear wasn't optimized, and we weren't running the temper that double cast blights. Now, there's a bug that's happening with that temper. When you double cast blight, the second blight that comes out is not actually double casting the Ebon Piercer bolts either, which is kind of not supposed to happen because there's other things that are happening in the game where that actually does happen. So if they fix that bug and we're able to double cast the Ebon Piercer bolts with the blight, with the optimized gear, we calculated the damage, it should get up to 300 million dot ticks or 600 million DPS. And we need to discuss how in the world that's happening. And really the reason why that's happening is this right here. Yeah, this node that's been in the game since its inception. So why in the world has it not been really all that relevant in the previous seasons, and now why is it in Season 4 it's so relevant? Well, let's talk about it. So the way that Wither works is that on a dot tick, that tick has a 5% chance to proc Wither, and that Wither is going to increase the damage of that tick by 50% multiplicatively. Now, dots deal damage twice every second, and if you only have a 5% chance, that means it's going to take 20 ticks average to proc Wither for one of those ticks to be increased by 50% multiplicatively, which if you run it down the line of math, means that over 10 seconds of your dots dealing damage, you're only getting 2.5% increased damage to your dots multiplicatively, which is not impressive, not good, not really good. Now, the way that Wither fixes this is that for every 60 intelligence that you add to your build, the chance of Wither increases by 1%, and the damage of Wither, modifying the tick's damage, goes up by 4%, so it kind of equals something out like this. Now, there's a 6% chance to proc Wither, and when the tick deals damage with Wither procced, it will deal 54% more damage instead of 50, which means that the true damage gain is now 3.24% chance. Here's the thing. Intelligence is a global multiplier. So when you add intelligence to your build, all of your damage is going to be increased. But it's also increasing the chance at which Wither has a chance to proc, and it's increasing the damage at which Wither is going to modify the tick's worth of damage. If you're a little bit suave at math and Excel, do you understand what's kind of happening here? If not, that's totally okay. I'm going to go a bit more into detail and explain what's happening here and why this can get real dumb real fast. So to kind of understand what's going on a little bit, what I want to talk about is what happens with basically every other stat in the game. So let's talk about intelligence, right? In Season 3, we were able to get to a max of about 840 intelligence. So we'll go right here. And if we were to increase our intelligence by that amount, by 840, that means that we're going to get 84% multiplicative damage to all damage in our build. What I want to look at is the separation of each breakpoint being 60 intelligence. For every 60 intelligence I add to my build, I'm literally just getting 6% more damage multiplicatively to my build. That's all that's happening. It's an added value. I'm just getting 6% more multiplicative damage to my build. It's not multiplying on top of each other, so it's just adding, right? It's just 6% every single time. Nothing crazy there. That's how every other stat in the game works. Crit hit damage, overpower damage, intelligence, everything, right? Attack speed, it all works that way. You're just adding a specific amount, and then the total additive amount of that is then multiplied on a separate global multiplier. Nothing crazy there. All right, let's look at Wither here, because Wither gets a little bit different. See, when we get to 840 intelligence, the chance for Wither to proc goes from 5% to 19%. So now we have 4 times more of a chance to actually proc Wither. And then when Wither procs, it's actually going to deal twice as much damage. So you'll have 2 increasing multipliers that are multiplying across each other that deal more damage. And if you have 2 increasing multipliers that go across each other, it is now no longer additive being 6%, 6%, 6%, 6%, or in this case, 0.75, 0.75, 0.75. What happens is now every separation is greater. So the separation between here and here, here to here, here to here is increasing. That is known as quadratic scaling. This is the only stat for Necromancers that can do this with Wither. We have a quadratic scaler in the game. Now, this has been in the game since its inception. Since June 2nd of 2023, when Diablo 4 was released, Wither's been in the game, and it's been a quadratic scaler. We knew about this. Why is it not all that relevant in previous seasons? Well, the reason why is because we just couldn't get the intelligence high enough. If we look here, it's only increasing the dot's damage by about 20%, but it takes 6 ticks on average for things to die, which means if the dots are dealing damage twice per second, that means it takes 3 seconds for the dot to actually tick wither, and when it does tick, it'll do 100% more damage, which means we're only getting 20% increased damage to the wither, or to the actual dots themselves over time, and everything just dies really fast in Diablo 4. There's not really that much of a challenge except for Abattoir of Zir, and so dot-based builds took a long time for wither to actually proc, and it wasn't really doing all that much damage. So this is why it wasn't really all that grand. We knew it exponentially scaled. We knew it was a quadratic multiplier, but it just wasn't high enough to justify what's going on. Season 4 changes that. Let's go in a little bit more detail of what I'm talking about. The reason why this is so much more relevant in Season 4 is because each of the items now just gives a higher base amount of intelligence, but on top of that, we can get greater affixes to roll for the intelligence, and then when we go to masterwork the pieces of gear, we can now get a double or triple stack on the intelligence, which means that at maximum value, we can get up to 2,700 intelligence. What does that do to the wither chance? Well, now the chance for wither to proc goes from 19% to 50%. And the actual damage that it's actually modifying to tick's damage goes from 106% to 230%. And when we run that across the chance for the average dots needed to proc, it goes from 6 to 2. So now not only is wither have a high chance to proc and it just does so much more damage, but it's front loaded. It doesn't take 3 seconds for the dot to actually proc wither. Now it only takes 1 second because remember, there's 2 ticks per second of the dot, and that means that it's going to proc wither. And when it does proc wither, it's going to proc it at a 230% value. So previously what was happening was that it would take 3 seconds, and let's say that your dot was dealing 1,000,000 damage. This would mean that it would do 1,000,000, 1,000,000, 1,000,000, 1,000,000, 1,000,000, and then it would modify it by the 106%, so it would do 2.06 mil. So mil, 2.06 mil. Now what's happening is because it only takes 2 ticks worth of dot to actually proc wither, it is now going 1 mil, 3.3 mil, 1 mil, 3.3 mil, 1 mil, 3.3 mil. That's a lot more damage, like a lot. All right. And not only that, we are actually increasing the total amount of intelligence that we have so that our global damage is, instead of going from 84%, it is now 270%. And those are multiplying across the quadratic multipliers of wither. So if we were to actually run the math all the way across, what this would mean is that over 3 seconds, because it takes 6 ticks worth of damage to actually proc wither, so we'll do that in terms of comparison. That means 3 seconds, we are able to get the dot to tick for 699% more damage. Well, in Season 4, over that 3 seconds, we are able to get the dot to tick for 4,173% damage. And if I were to take this and divide it by this, now what happens is that we've increased our damage by a multiplier of 6. Why is that relevant? Well, we've only given ourselves 3 times more intelligence, so we should only do 3 times more damage. This number should say 3, but it says 6. So I'm getting 3 times more intelligence, which means I should do 3 times more damage. But because of wither being a quadratic multiplier, we are now doing 6 times more damage. And this is the only stat for Necromancers that can pull this off. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a chart to more visually explain what I'm trying to get across. Okay, so let's actually go into the chart and show kind of what I'm doing here. Right, so this is wither. You see how every point of intelligence here, this is the x-axis, intelligence, and this is the damage that wither is doing. Do you see how every single point of intelligence that we are giving is exponentially climbing? It's not supposed to do that. Any other stat, when you add intelligence, it's not supposed to do that. When you add intelligence, it's actually supposed to look something like this. Now, this can be any stat in the game. This can be crit, this can be intelligence, this can be overpower, this can be attack speed. It's just a flat line, right? If I'm doing 100% more crit hit damage and I have 10% base damage, I should do 20. If I have 200%, I should do 30. And it says that right there, 30. If I have 300%, I should do 40, right? That's just how it's supposed to work. It doesn't exponentially climb the more crit hit damage you give. It's just a nice consistent line. Wither breaks that rule. Wither says that every single point of intelligence that you're gaining, you're just exponentially going to do more damage. Now, what does this mean when we actually practically put it into the game? It means that Shadow Dot builds are going to dominate the meta in everything, whether it be speed builds, whether it be endgame. Because in speed builds, the reason why dots weren't all that great was because it took so long for Wither to proc, but now because we can get our intelligence so high, it only takes 2 ticks worth of the dot to actually proc Wither, and they will just one-shot everything, including Helltide bosses. They will just one-shot them. Dead. right? Just from the dot tick. And on top of that, for endgame builds, they're really good because not only when you stack the dots does the damage get as high as you saw, like 160 mil, but shadow builds have a lot more access to damage reduction via the darkness glyph and the nodes that are actually in the Paragon board, and the fact of how aspect of ultimate shadow dealing its dot damage actually scales with aspect of shielding storm, which that will be a video for another time. But shadow builds just have so much access to defensive utility, which makes them prime for endgame content, and they have exponentiated damage with intelligence, which just makes them absolutely goated for basically anything endgame. Now, this doesn't mean that shadow dot builds are going to be the best at the beginning of the game, because like I said, it takes a lot of intelligence for this to turn on. And previously, it's even at 840 intelligence, it wasn't really all that great. We have to get our intelligence really high, like 2K plus, in order for this to really show its colors. So front-loaded crit damage builds are still going to be king in the beginning of the game. So things like Bone Spear, Blood Surge, Bone Spirit, Corpse Explosion, stuff like that, they're still going to reign supreme, and I would suggest that's what you should be running at the beginning of the game. But as you start shifting into the end game, you really start want to do that hard content or just really get that big build together, you're probably going to want to start shifting into shadow dot builds that are utilizing super bloated intelligence with the aspect of the legendary node being Wither. So I hope that this was informative. I hope that this was educational. I hope you liked this. If you did, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe in the comment section below. More Necro video builds to come, more things to talk about, but I want to get this out so you guys could kind of start formulating your plan when you go into Season 4. That's all I have for you. Have a wonderful day. Operator Otter,